In this module, we will learn the inputs, tools and techniques, and outputs of the Identify Stakeholders process. Identify Stakeholders is the process of naming people and organizations that will impact and be influenced by the project and document their interests, involvement, and impact on the success of the project. Although this process will mostly occur at the beginning of the project, it can and should be repeated throughout the project lifecycle, such as when a new phase is initiated or there is a major change to the project environment. The PMBOK guide defines a few inputs to the Identify Stakeholders process. The first input defined is the project charter, which is a project document formed by the project sponsor to authorize the project, its funding, and name the project manager. This document should directly indicate who the sponsor and project manager are and may indicate other team members, the customer, or external parties that will be involved. The business case and benefits management plan may have provided initial lists of stakeholders before the project was initiated. Agreements may be used to determine stakeholders that are revealed in contracts that may exist between the performing organization and the customer. Also, as the performing organization forms relationships with vendors, suppliers, or subcontractors, they will become stakeholders into the project. Environmental factors can be an input, as organizational culture can influence which tiers of management will become stakeholders. Governmental regulations may also create new stakeholders. Finally, organizational process assets may contribute actual stakeholder registers from past projects, lessons learned, and templates. There are several tools and techniques for the Identify Stakeholders process. Questionnaires and surveys help to identify stakeholders and their interests from a broad audience. Brainstorming involves team discussion to identify stakeholders. The primary tool and technique for this process is called stakeholder analysis. Stakeholder analysis involves 3 steps to document all of the individuals and organizations that have stake in the project and gain a better understanding of their expectations. Another key tool and technique is stakeholder mapping and representation, which may include a power interest grid, stakeholder cube, salience model, or directions of influence to help document relationships of how stakeholders will influence the project. Let's take a closer look at the 3 steps involved in stakeholder analysis and an example of stakeholder mapping. Step 1 is simply to identify all of the potential stakeholders to the project. It is also useful to describe their role to the project using categories to help generalize how each will be communicated with. Once a list of key stakeholders has been identified, it can be utilized to identify additional project stakeholders. Step 2 is to investigate the influence each stakeholder group may have to project execution. Graphical grids or salience models can be used to measure or prioritize the power the stakeholder has to change the project and the level of interest or concern the stakeholder has over project objectives and outcomes, and the level of involvement that is expected. In the power interest grid shown, stakeholders with higher combined power and interest scores will require higher detail and frequency of communication. Step 3 involves anticipating stakeholder reactions to various project decisions or changes in the project environment. Doing this up front will help the team to enhance support throughout the project and minimize the negative impact of stakeholder issues. Specifically for risk management, it is important to understand the stakeholder tolerances to each of the risk types or categories. The primary output of the Identify Stakeholders process is the stakeholder register. In addition to listing the individual stakeholders and organizations, it may also provide contact information, a description of their stake in the project, their expectations, and their potential influence to the project objectives. Because stakeholders must have an active role in determining the product and quality requirements, this project document may be used as an input to collect requirements and the plan quality process. The stakeholder register will also be an input to the plan communications and identify risks process to help ensure they are being informed throughout the project lifecycle and that their risk tolerances are being considered. The other output of the Identify Stakeholders process is change requests. The stakeholder register is iterated and new stakeholders are identified or new information becomes available about existing stakeholders. Changes may be needed to deliverables or project baselines. Identify Stakeholders is the process of naming people and organizations that will impact and be influenced by the project and document their interests, involvement, and impact on the success of the project. Although this process will mostly occur at the beginning of the project, it can and should be repeated throughout the project lifecycle, such as when a new phase is initiated or there is a major change to the project environment.